Hey everyone, and welcome back to my mod update videos. Today we'll be taking a look at Alpha Update version 2. There's a lot to look at on this one, or I think there is at least. But I'm going to try and keep it as quick as possible, so we're only covering the most essential stuff, but be prepared for a long video. So let's get started with some more basic updates to the mod. So first of all, the ability wheel has been changed. First of all, you'll notice that the animation for opening is a little bit smoother. It helps a little bit. There are still some cases where there's some issues. I'm still working on this wheel, so bear with me, but I have made some improvements on it in general. One of the most significant changes now is that you no longer have a toggle ability. So the opening and closing of the wheel is now used by holding down a button. You can also change this in the config folder if you wish to have it the old way, but this is just a much more convenient way because you can just hold when you want it and turn it off when you don't need. In addition to this, we've also added the fact that you no longer need to actually press the buttons to do anything. So just hovering over them should select the ability for you. So now you can come in, switch abilities fairly easily. Now I'm working on zoning these things as well. So instead of you having to actually click on an icon, for example, which is fairly large, so it should still be relatively easy. In the future, it will be that you just have to click in certain zones to click on them. Hopefully this makes things a little bit better, at least for now. Also, you have a name tag now, so once something is selected, you'll always know which ability is selected when you come back into the wheel, and that should make maybe navigating around a little bit easier. The second change is the mana bar. You can see the mana count is now smaller and centered. Tanks have now had their range increase. It used to be 3 blocks, it's now 5. Jade powder and all Jade related products are now labeled as nexite, and as an addition, nexite can now be compressed into a nexite block, and of course can be decompressed again. The wandability menu has now had a little bit of an upgrade. You'll notice that in here you're going to see a separate section that you can scroll. Please ignore this for now. In the future, this will be just a way for you to hover over a augment and for you to be able to see what it does, and then a slightly more detailed view. The detailed view, however, isn't really much of a problem because the detailed view is also available here. Speaking of which, what used to be the bone meal ability is now called Farmer's Touch. But instead of just doing the classic bone meal, it now will bone meal, harvest, and replant all in one go. Now, obviously, this is a fairly overpowered ability. So as a way to compensate for this, you don't actually guarantee it. In fact, it's 20% chance to replant, and 20% chance to bone meal, and 20% chance to place. This is all obviously max values. The lower values are different. In addition to those, you also have ranges. So the shortest range will be a 3x3, and then extending outwards. The block placer ability now no longer, as it used to, use the offhand item to place. Instead now, if you shift and left click on a block that you want, you can assign it, and then block placer should be able to place from your inventory. I'm going to add some compatibility for sophisticated backpacks, so it can also take directly from your backpack. The arcane shift ability now has a block highlight, so you can see where you're going. Maybe it's a little bit hard to see in the video, but it has a pretty clear visibility even at long distances. So now it should be a little bit easier for you to know exactly where you're going. Just as a reminder, you'll always be teleported onto the top of a block. One other thing that you might have noticed is you now have a cast animation on the wand. So when you cast, you can see there's a cast animation for it. And if we go into survival and I can cast, and if I try and cast again and I can't do that, we now have a feedback to let you know that you can't cast for whatever the reason is. There's usually a message to explain that anyway. But now you have a audio feedback, and you have the little wiggle of the wand, which I think is cool. Additionally, the modification screen for modifiable augments, like usually the utility ones, has now been updated. So it's a little bit more in line with the rest of the menus that you'll be seeing. And you can now modify the growth chance, harvest abilities, and obviously here something that you probably would change would be range. So you can now toggle ranges from here too. Also, obviously you now have the abilities and their icon when you're in the screen, so you know what you're in, just in case you forgot. Additionally, the augment core texture has now changed. You can see it's a little bit more core-y looking, whatever that means. And the reason for that is obviously because we have 2 new augments introduced to the family here. So this is part of our first bit of our new features here. So we now have the augment core, which is the base one, the advanced augment core, and the augment hypercore. What these are used for? Well, one of the newest changes that you'll be seeing is that when you go into a loot chest, for example, the loot chest will no longer have pre-modified attributes. So in here you can see everything that you find now will be basically like this. You'll have all the base values only, and what you'll be able to do with these now is to upgrade them yourself. So this is the augment modification table, and initially when you come up to it, if you right click, you can't access it. You have to place an augment down first of all. And just while we're here, you can also hot swap the augments out whenever you want, just by right clicking with the one in your hand. But once you have an augment in the slot, you can right click to access the augment menu. Now you'll have access to all of the attributes or all the modifiers here for every ability. You'll also be able to see the ranges and what you're currently at. If you hover over the upgrade button here, you'll also be able to see what level that you unlock from your current one. So you can see here you go from mana cost of 180 down to 170, and the cost of this upgrade is just a standard augment core. If I upgrade, the next upgrade is also the same. You can now see it's the next cost is going to be the advanced augment core, and then as you carry on getting higher, the cost will obviously go up. Then you need an augment hypercore. So the further you go up, the more expensive these things will get. Doing it this way allows you a little bit more freedom to upgrade whatever parts of an ability that you want whenever you want to do it, or whatever you have available in terms of materials. So you can always choose what's more important to you. Is damage more important to you? Is area of effect more important to you? In some cases, these things will be obvious. I think that you'll come to find that they're not as obvious as you think they are. Some things can be way more specific. So you might immediately think that damage is better, but it might be that you find at some point that you want a lower cooldown because using it more often is better than doing more damage at a time. And equally as important is spawning speed. So it gives you a little bit more freedom, and upgrading something fully to the max of its ability will take you a little bit of time because it will be a little bit more expensive. And by the way, if you need access to your inventory to add the augment cores in at first, if you click the button over here, you can bring your inventory up for you to be able to fill up again, and then you can just hide it when you want to scroll around. Once you upgraded something completely, you'll see the bar will go gray. You can no longer click or hover it, and until the future when you can overpower abilities, this will be like the top line for everything. I didn't already mention this, but you can still find unidentified augments, so you can still find ones that you can manually roll, which will give you completely random modifiers. I will say though, this will probably be temporary because I have better ways of implementing this later on, but you can still find these. They're very rare, but for the most part you'll be finding ones that already exist. As far as how you get the new augment cores going forward, as it stands right now, in order for you to get the advanced augment core, you'll need 4 augment cores as well as 4 nexite powder, and in order for you to get the augment hypercore, you'll need 4 advanced cores as well as 4 blocks of nexite. This will be temporary, I believe, because there'll be other ways for you to get these. I know that you may struggle a little bit with finding augment cores for you to get the more advanced versions. As a fix for that, what I've done is at least temporarily, it may be permanent, and it actually may be better permanent later on. When you kill a mob with any form of magic from the mod, you'll have a chance, like a 1 in 20 or 30 chance for them to drop an augment, which, as you're aware, can be then recycled and then have a chance to give you an augment core. So that should solve the recyclability of everything for now. But in the future, these will be findable / winnable. We'll get back to that another time. Actually, I also forgot to mention, in addition to the chance of mobs dropping an augment, they also have an additional chance to drop an augment core specifically. So you could get both. If you know, there's a small chance, but you could get both. So with all that out of the way, I want to get to what I think is probably the best / most important part of this update. As of this update, we now have what is called the Modular Chaos Cube, or MCC for short. The point of this block is to basically add a way for you to add some automation from this mod, and to put to use some of the augments that you find that you may not want to recycle for whatever reason. So what exactly does it do? Well, anything that a utility augment can do, or anything that most utility augments can do, there are a couple exceptions of course, this can operate just the same as you can. However, in this case, it can be automated entirely by this block. In this top one here, we have the fetch ability, which is new by the way, I forgot to mention this. This basically collects items in a certain radius. In this case, it's 10 blocks. So any item entities that are in range of this ability will be picked up and added to your inventory, or in this case, an external inventory. Before we start with the operation of everything, let's have a little explore through the GUI. So you have your standard on and off button over here. You also have this chain button hit right next to it. So how this block works, how these blocks work, I guess, is they are interlinkable. So if you have a bunch of them linked together, if all of them have their chain mode on, which is the state at default, whenever you turn one on, all the attached ones will also turn on. So you can run multiple operations at the same time with the same intervals and whatnot. If you decide that you don't want to do that, you can always unlink and run them separately so they don't have any links anymore. You can toggle between whatever you like. So when you click on or you click off, they will, if they're linked, they will all turn on and off together. You also have the speed dial, which is how often the operation runs. Currently, there's no additional cost for this, but it does cost a lot more in nexite powder. Speaking of which, the nexite powder, which you can see here, this is the tank that your blocks are currently attached to. In my case, it's the waterlogged one at the bottom over here. So that's the one that this will use for running operations, and it has a full tank. Just so you're aware, how it works is the mana cost is how much each operation will cost in nexite powder from the tank that's attached. So obviously in this case, it's a cost of 10. Each operation will cost 10. In the one below, the mana cost is 15. So each operation will cost 15. So it's 25 in total, which you'll find to be kind of expensive, but don't worry, we'll get back to that later. Anyway, here on the left, you have the direction of the operation, whichever direction you want the projectile, or I guess the operation to work. Keep in mind that all of the abilities run from as projectiles, so you want something for them to hit in order for them to basically do something. On the right here, you'll have the additional inventory. So if it's applicable for the ability, you'll have an additional directional thing on the side. In this case, it's the eject because this is a fetch ability. So instead of adding it to a player's inventory, it will add it to an external inventory, which you can then define when you choose here. So what we'll go ahead and do is just go and add a barrel for now. And if you add a barrel to the top, and then I want to change it to the top, which it already is, that's now done for you. And that's pretty much the overall of it. One thing that you will find with some abilities is that you'll have a cogwheel. This will be the abilities specific page. So just as you saw when you right click an ability, you can go ahead and change those directly in this GUI, so you don't have to like take it out and change. So if I don't want the range to be as big for whatever reason, I can change the ranges down whatever I want. The same goes for any other abilities. Like in this one, I can change the growth chances and the range for harvesting and doing everything on this side too. So one other neat trick, by the way, so if you have a setup like this one here, and you think, okay, I have it set to direction operation down, and everything else matches, the speed is good, and you want to apply this to another one, if you just look at the block and hit Control C, in this case this is also zoom for me, that's why you saw it do the weird thing, you can also see it said copied, and then if I look at the next one and hit Control V, you can paste the properties to this one. So when the direction was down here, it's also down here as well. It will do the speed for you too. In this case, you can see I copied and pasted it, and the speed is now fast on this one. It will also do this for inventories, by the way, so all the inventory stuff will change. Okay, with all that said, let's go ahead and fire this up now. So it should be good to go. If I stand back, you can kind of see the operation running, so you can see the items being picked up, and you can see the blocks being harvested, they being replaced, and they're also being bone milled. All the collected items are now going to the inventory at the top. That's the fetch ability working. And if I wanted to, I could turn this all off. As you can see, both operations turned off now, so neither of them are running. I can go ahead and unlink this, and I can do just the item collection ability. So now, when it runs, you can see that it picked up the item, so it's still working, and then I can link these back up, turn it off again, and then when I turn them both on, you'll see that they both run. So just remember, these basically work for almost every utility, as long as it's not like something that requires the player itself. So that leaves you with quite a lot of stuff. Now, the good thing with these, as you actually saw here, they don't interact with each other. Now, one thing you don't really notice off the rip is that there is a projectile that's doing all of this stuff. And what happens is when the projectile hits a block, for example, just like your ability does, it then operates from the hit block in that radius from that point. So whenever it hits the tank underneath it, it uses the same Y level to carry out the operation on. And as another example, if I go ahead and replace the fetch ability here, and I'll use the vein miner ability instead, we got it to full size at this point, and we'll look at what direction this is. So this is south. So if I set the direction here to south, we conveniently have a tree placed here as well. So just like you can with the vein miner ability, you can then fire the projectile that you just saw there, and you can use the vein miner. The possibilities are endless. And as I said, because the way this works, even if you stack like 5 of them in front of each other, all of their projectiles that they shoot, none of them interact with the block itself. So you could run 5 different operations. So for example, you could run a vein miner, you could then run a fetch ability behind it, you could then run the block placer to place another sapling for you, you can then run the farmer's touch ability to maybe bone meal that sapling, and so on. The possibilities are fairly endless, and I think it's going to be kind of fun seeing what everybody comes up with. Okay, so this has been quite the yapathon. As I told you, there was quite a lot to cover. There is one last thing left, however. As you've probably already noticed from the cost of operation for the automation block, it's going to become quite expensive as far as like nexite powder is concerned. Mining it, obviously, probably not going to cover what you'll need to like do like larger scale automation. Obviously, I had to come up with a more efficient way to get nexite without having to mine whenever you need some. This is where the enchanted fusion ability comes. So the enchanted fusion ability is going to be your source of renewable nexite, and it works quite simply, to be honest. So just like any other ability, which again can also be used in automation, I'll let you guys figure out everything. You can enchant or fuse a block with magic to have it convert. So some blocks that are applicable include logs, just like this one. You can see as it hits the block has become fused or infused with magic. And what's going to happen is over time, as you saw there, the block will come slowly more infested. But eventually over time, the whole thing will become converted. And what you'll eventually get is raw nexite. So this is a raw nexite block. And I think you can also see what happened after the operation is after it had finished converting, it then spread to adjacent blocks. Now, this is not always the case, and we'll get into that a little bit in a second, but it can infest onto other blocks, which gives you more chance to get the raw nexite block. Raw nexite, fairly straightforward. Stick it in a furnace, and then you can smelt it down. Once it's smelted, you'll get the nexite block, the full one that you use to compress, which then obviously can be broken down into nexite essence, and that's basically your way of getting a renewal nexite essence. Obviously this is a little bit more complicated, so we'll get into the mechanics of this altogether. So how this works is there are different categories of blocks, some of them better than others, and I'm going to expand on them eventually anyway, but I'm going to give you some smaller examples. In total, there are about like 6 categories of things. So there's like trash blocks, kind of like stone and cobblestone. Then you have like logs, all kinds of logs, and leaves are in a similar category. You have crappy ores, or like not so expensive ores like iron or coal. You also have your more expensive ores, things like diamond blocks or diamond ores or emerald ores, or even like ancient debris. And then you have your really expensive blocks. This could be your diamond block or even like a block of netherite. So with that being said, how do these work? The infestation or the enchantment and the likelihood of spreading the enchantment depends on what type of block you use. So obviously on the worst blocks, the chance of it transferring over to the next block is significantly lower. And every time it transfers, the likelihood of it transferring to a neighboring block diminishes over time. Now, this is true for all of these. Obviously, the further down you get, the less likely the diminishing is to happen. And when you get down to diamond blocks, I think this also works with emeralds and blocks of netherite, there is no diminishing. So no matter how much an infestation happens or an enchantment happens, it will always carry over to the other blocks. Not the case for the others. In addition to that, not just the infestation chance, but also the speed in which these happen vary a lot. Just as an example of what it could look like once you have like a really good setup and you have sufficient resources, let's have a look at what would happen if you invest a diamond block, for example. You can see the spread is really quick and the chance of spreading is 100% on these. Within a short space of time, we got a good amount of raw nexite, which can then just be converted into nexite powder again once it's been smelted, and you could run a good amount of operations. Now obviously, to get to the point where you have enough resources to be doing this fully automated and for you to be getting enough where you can like make good use out of this is going to be a little while, but all of these are still somewhat useful. It just means that you'll be running things a little bit slower as you're lower down, and eventually you'll get up to a much better speed. Now I can sit here for another 25 minutes and explain everything to you in a little bit more detail, but to be honest with you, I think this is probably something that's best for you to kind of explore, play around with, and then kind of leave some feedback on. I'm sure there'll be some things that don't really make too much sense and that you think will probably need to be changed. Those things will always be welcome in my Discord. Again, everything's in alpha, one person developer. You may find that there are bugs with things. Just if you leave them in the Discord, I'll probably get them fixed relatively quickly if they're easy to fix, or even if it's just like general feedback on things. Everything is welcome. With that being said, I'm going to end the video here. The next update is going to be focused on combat kind of stuff. If you got any suggestions as far as like abilities are concerned, like you think something would be cool to implement, obviously same thing again, leave them in the Discord, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.